The type of people that are able to be flexible and being open and positive and also surrender to the things that they can't control, as we touched on before. They're the type of people that do well that I see in business and stand the test of time.
Welcome to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast. Having been on his own incredible journey of self-discovery, today's guest has dedicated his life to helping people find peace, balance and vitality. With a clientele list that includes some of the most influential people on the planet, our guest has become affectionately known around the world as the Wellbeing Manager. He's been very influential in a couple of life-changing moments in my life, so whenever I get the chance to sit down with him, I always jump at the chance.
We can only control our thoughts, words and actions in our life. We can't control anything else. Win, lose, fail, succeed, doesn't matter. It's all a lesson for me to keep stepping forward. Whoever has the biggest imagination will be able to overcome all sorts of very difficult circumstances. Well-being or life is a feeling rather than a thinking.
So please welcome back to the Escape Your Limits podcast, a good friend and mentor, Mr. Paul Lubicz. Thank you, Paul, for inviting me to this beautiful place. There is a bit of a story. Some famous martial artist used to come here, is that right?
Yes, Bruce Lee used to come here and used to work out with the former owner of the house. My dear friend Jess, very kind, and gave us this space for the day. It's a beautiful, tranquil place. And this is our second time we've sat down. Remind me of when we went on a hike together and you were living in the UK. Remind me what was going on in your life then. So that was around 2014, was it?
It was
2012?
2014, yeah. I think it was 2014. I've got the picture still. I came out for IDEA and we were figuring out how to build the business in America. And my wife and you had obviously been in conversation about stopping off in LA on the way back. And I think you'd recommended a hotel, and she didn't tell. Normally, she would kind of tell me where I'm going. She's like, "Oh, it's a bit of a surprise," and she put me in a beautiful place. I don't know if you
Le Petit Four.
Exactly.
Le Petit Maison, was it?
Yeah, in
West
sort of West Hollywood. Yeah,
I think it's on Curzon Street. I can't quite remember. Anyway, but I know the hotel. Really sweet.
Beautiful hotel, and that was quite magical. And then you took me for a hike, which was quite interesting. And it was on that hike I made the decision. It's like everything in life. Sometimes you kind of think about things for a long time, but you have to, I guess, make a decision before. And maybe you think you're making a decision, but you're not. But I think that conversation that you had was maybe it was like an hour climbing over some hills, and it's like, make the decision. And I remember making it, taking the picture, and then I called my wife, and we went back. I went back. I left you, had some lunch on. There's a place called the Lobster in Santa Monica, and I remember looking and saying, "We're moving," you know. That was a pretty interesting point in my life.
And you took a big leap of faith, in yourself, which takes a lot of courage. The great unknown, that space you look into and there's darkness staring back at you. You don't know what's on the other side.
Sometimes it's good not to know what's on the other side. I think if someone had mapped out all the details, sort of like, yeah, forget about that.
But then, we've also had a relationship around ice cream.
We have, yes.
So I took you to that Salt and Straw in Venice Beach. I think that was before, when we were talking before about last time we sat down, when we were going to sit down. And then last time when we had a pre-podcast chat, we went to Ginger's out in Mar Vista, close to where I am now.
Well, I said, okay, so what are we going to talk about? And you know me, I've got my notes, but I said, what are we going to? And you said, just don't, it'll just. I can't remember exactly your words, but it was like, okay, we'll just figure it out. So
yeah.
And I told the team, because they're like, okay, what do we need to prepare? Have you got the information? I'm like, Paul just says don't bring anything, just come totally unprepared, and we'll see how the conversation goes, which is in some cases it's quite nerve-wracking to just go into a situation unprepared. I guess if you're the person that likes to be in control of everything.
It's interesting, that idea about control, right? It's something that this great man came into my life around 2012 when I first came to Los Angeles. His name's Howard Wills, and he has really mastered positive psychology, not to abandon reality in any way, shape or form, but he's a very unique individual that had a very profound effect on me. And one of the foundations of his teachings that he taught me when I was first came to Los Angeles was we can only control our thoughts, words, and actions in our life. We can't control anything else. And that was very liberating, the recognition of that. Like, I may have an expectation of how you're going to come today or what you're going to do, but I can't control you, you can't control me. Or if you attempt to do that, then that's, some difficulty comes along, and that happens in a lot of relationships. But also the flip side of that is when you let go of the idea of controlling things outside of your thoughts, your words and actions, it gives you a lot of serenity and peace, but it also brings you reels you back into like, I have a level of responsibility for my awareness of, if my thinking is negative, or if it's heavy, or if it's pessimistic or negative, I've got a choice in the matter to turn that around. If I'm talking, in alignment with that thinking, that might be, harsh or clunky, disruptive to others, or less connecting, and then my actions, which kind of filter down thoughts, words, and then actually bringing it into reality. It gives you, I find it empowering. I feel empowered when I'm aware. If I can create positive thoughts, words, and deeds, or positive thought, words, and actions in my life, then I am a creator, and then I've got a say in the matter. And then it also helps me remember the fact that, that comes with responsibility, for the awareness of all those things.
You brought up a thought that I had yesterday where there was a business situation, but we had, as a group of people, we had a conversation, and maybe from talking to you, it was a case of, look, we're spending a lot of time on playing the scenario of things that we can't control, and obviously that, the options that you've got there are just literally unlimited. You could just spend so many time. Well, what about this? What about that? And the point you've just made there is, and then you end up with overwhelm, because it's like, okay, well, what's happening outside of our control, and then what's happening inside of our control. The point that the penny drop for me is okay, well, we can put much more energy into the things that we can control, really just tighten up on so much, and almost like, just as you said, take this whole weight off our shoulder about trying to figure that out, because that's stressful, and it ended up creating a lot of even debate amongst the group that were talking about it, and you kind of think, well, it's all unnecessary debate. We can't do anything about that. What we can do is kind of bring ourselves together, focusing on the things that we've got. And my guess is that is probably makes the whole situation a lot better, and makes us a lot stronger. And also, as you said, just sort of takes a lot of the worry and responsibility off your shoulders of worrying about things that you just can't do anything about.
Ease and grace is it's a real gift. We've talked before in the past, and I know that you naturally do this, but another idea that can exist in collaboration with that, controlling thoughts, words, and actions, and everything else is out of our control. Another idea that may be helpful to coexist is going towards what you want rather than avoiding or going away from what you don't want, and sort of really harnessing that directness of, this is my dream, this is my vision, I'm following my purpose, and this is the direction I'm headed towards. And I find it more potent than, okay, this is what I don't want to happen, so I'm going to gear my strategy, my ideas, my energy, my collaborations, my creativity directed away from that thing that I'm avoiding. I find it to be just really direct. This is what I want, I'm going towards that. And stepping towards that and going directly towards that can be unusual because there's been many times in my life when I've expected struggle and struggle has just shown up if I'm going towards something. And there's also times when I've just gone towards what I want and then it was a lot easier than I had expectations of it being. It's interesting just that these are just ideas that are presented in a obtruse way, in a fashion that is maybe in reverse, and it's a great sort of technique for you to have a abstract idea. It's almost like you can be your own plant medicine, which is wild. Like quite often in a plant medicine experience, you'll see a set of circumstances, but it's presented to you in a very abstract way. And that can really evoke a different perspective within you, and then they can be a great conversation starter. So just flipping things like that, I find it might be able to keep things that are not positive off balance, where I can return to my center if I was feeling out of balance.
Introducing the next big thing in functional training, the Escape Barrow, a revolutionary training tool that combines a loaded farmer's carry with a sled push to develop hip, grip, and core strength. Developed in partnership with Pete Holman, inventor of the TRX Rip Trainer and Nautilus Glute Drive, the Escape Barrow can be rolled, pushed, dragged, and carried. The Escape Barrow packs a punch with an impressive load capacity of 440 pounds, and with a two-stage galvanized paint covering process, it's also ideal for outdoor use. So head over to escapefitness.com/barrow. That's escapefitness.com/barrow to find out more. Enjoy the rest of this episode.
Plant medicine, I've never done it, but what do you explain that in a little bit more detail? And so what do you, when you have that experience then, like how is information being presented to you about in using that example?
So we have so many resources available to us, but if we were using all those resources, when I'm referring to information about, say, just walking down the street, we've got our balance going on and we can see if cars are coming, other people, just sort of orientated sort of normally. If you think about it, our resources are kind of narrowed in so we're able to focus and function. And the way I feel about plant medicine, if it's done the right way, for the right reason, with the right people, it can open up your resources and you can have access to more information which may give you some ideas that in a normal setting or circumstance they would have been maybe veiled. You may not have had access to them. And considering all those things I talked about, if you're doing it for the right reason, with the right people, in the right place, it can be a powerful sort of catalyst because it'll bring a certain amount of chaos, and chaos can be really good if it's supported by, a lot of other positive things that you can integrate it and process it and understand it and then use that unique perspective, that abstract idea, and see if you can create more freedom in your life or create more access to belonging, which is something that belonging is a really big deal, to feel like you belong.
With that, as an example, I think the way I'll interpret what you've said is that in most of life, we all live, we have a very narrow view on what's going on in it. And for obvious reasons, we're trying to balance, think about this, think about our work, our family. So we have this one perspective, and having an experience like you said, or talking to someone, or relaxing, or whatever, sort of switches that off and kind of unlocks a number of other windows in your mind to maybe just almost step back, and things decisions and opportunities that you clearly don't see, and routes that are open to you that you're missing. And so but even someone who I talk to people, even like yourself, about this all the time, it seems to be very difficult to build that into what you're doing, and not suddenly realize, 6 months has gone since I've had that conversation, and I've not really re-looked through that window since we spoke about it. How do you, and working with people, get the how do you get people to create their lives where they are becoming more aware of some of these other things that just through life they're just not recognizing?
So there's two pieces to that. If we just step back for a second about the idea of doing a ceremony, whether it's plant medicine or fasting or meditation or whatever it is, to create a different physical environment, that idea is as above, so below, so a unique environment, let's say in nature, which is very powerful. And you're in nature and you're having a different physical experience, and that in itself will help promote a different way of feeling or thinking, or it'll contribute to that. But there's two pieces is about healing. So sometimes it's difficult to have a clear vision of your purpose and your unique gifts that you're given, and your path and the path of your heart, and seeing that clearly. It's difficult sometimes, not impossible, but difficult if there is still unresolved trauma or heaviness from your past, which you could relate to things that had happened, and you forgiving it or making peace with it in some way, shape, or form. So there's two pieces to that. Sometimes if I said to you, okay, Matthew, we're going to go and do an off-site, okay, with your company, and we're going to dream these new big visions for the business coming into the next 18 months, and we're going to, this is going to require us to be very creative and imaginary, use our imagination. It's difficult if you're stressed and anxious, or you've got sort of a heaviness or, melancholy, or, if you're feeling sad, whatever it is. But if that has not been shifted in some way, shape, or form, it'd be hard for us to have a wonderful, creative, imaginary sort of conversation. So you could describe, there's so many methods that are very, very helpful for people to find healing and remember who they really are, their true nature. So coming back to themselves and remembering who they really are. Nature is a wonderful way to do that. Going on an adventure, being around positive, like-minded people, working with a skilled therapist of some sort that specializes in these things. I've ceased to be amazed with the stories that I've heard through my career of the different ways people have discovered healing, or discovered letting go of a heaviness or a restriction or a belief system, or mending a relationship with themselves. So that piece of healing, or remembering who you really are, or really belonging in your own body, and in belonging in your mind, belonging in your heart, belonging with how you interact with the world, is a really great place to start. And then from there, once you have discovered more about yourself, or remembered or let go of anything like a patina that was sitting around, that part of you that was pure and authentic, and you remember that part of you, of who you really are, and that patina sort of drops away, then that's a really magical place to go and create from. So the way I see any difficult circumstance, like a business is a difficult circumstance at times, you can become enlightened by being a businessman. There's no doubt about that in the way I feel about it. There's so many lessons that you can learn in the journey of particularly a startup, being an entrepreneur. It really challenges you on many fronts, and it brings up all sorts of insecurities or heaviness or doubt or fear, uncertainty. It allows you to become more comfortable with being uncomfortable. There's the whole host of things that you could go through a business journey, let's say, if we're just for the sake of this conversation, started out, and over the course of 10 years at the other end, you could become a sage.
Yeah.
And you could be very wise, particularly when you're all in and it's 10 out of 10 important to you, and you get your heart broken, or you almost get to the top of the mountain, and then when you get there, you realize you're at the bottom of the next mountain. And when people let you down and there's betrayal or expectations are not met, there's so many different ways for you to have these very strong feelings and emotions in business. And then for you to discover your relationship with them and discover more about yourself during those experiences. And the other end of that, I'm certain that you'll have more knowing of yourself, and therefore you could describe that of belonging, a deeper sense of belonging in yourself, deeper sense of calm, peace, all those things that are very attractive around someone that has had some life under their belt.
It's got me, when you've said that, there's a few things that are coming into my mind about purpose. Do you think that, and I've had a number of conversations with people over the years about this, how do you find your purpose? How do you find what you should be doing? Whether it's predominantly it's been from a business and career perspective. How do you know you're in the right business, you're doing the right thing? And it's something that I get to talk to people a lot, and it's a difficult thing. Some people, like musicians and sports people, you kind of think, well, they must have found that out when they were quite young, and then they just gone on to develop it. And other people, it takes them a long time to do it. But I wonder whether you think you use this word remember, which is quite interesting. Remember who you are. And I think we can sometimes just forget about that. But I also want, and then you also mentioned it's like kind of to discover who you are. So some of it could be remember who you are when it might be so long ago you've totally forgot, but maybe you've never really discovered who you are. And I wonder, your perspective is, do you think that part of, whether we call it our purpose or our mission or our calling in life or what we should be doing business-wise or whatever, do you think some of that, as you say, is stripping things back and trying to understand, connect with who we really are and figure that out and put in the time to understand that? And that is what answers that question that, I suppose, the way I've thought about it is I'm kind of looking out there to find out what it is. What am I in the right place or am I not? And whereas the way you're explaining it is reminding, discovering, because it's kind of there, it's just probably covered up, as you say. Like, well, how do you sort of make sense of what I've just said?
I love being direct, so I'll ask you, Matthew, and put you on the spot a little bit.
Okay.
Like, what were you made for?
Well, I don't know. I guess that's a big question.
See, I would disagree. Is I feel that you do know. The way I feel about you is you do know, and that you're rediscovering that as you go along, and you're gaining confidence and remembering, and you're getting sort of feedback from your life that this feels good, because well-being is a feeling, So the more you receiving positivity, positive feelings, I feel like I'm in flow. I see a lot of synchronicity in my life. I feel I'm in the right place in the right time. I feel that this is what I was made for, and it is unfolding in front of me as I'm walking towards it. I'm coming from that same place. It's sort of a symbiotic relationship with, this is what you're made for, and you're expressing that gift and sharing that with the world through your humility, through your commonality, through connecting, through feeling like you belong, and creating an environment where other people feel they can belong to. And it's a wonderful reciprocal experience. So I would say you're a host. You're hosting me on your podcast right now. You're also hosting people that come across you in your life and sharing ideas and collaborating. And it's a positive experience for everybody, and people can walk away feeling connected. And connection, your gift, let's say one of your many gifts could be that you help people feel connected. And this is a great medium for people to help feel connected, because a lot of people can feel lonely or alone, and particularly in your industry, in the health and fitness industry. I mean, and if you're a trainer or you're a business owner, it can be very lonely. You're in a sea of other people wanting to do the same kind of thing. It's very, there's a lot of competition. Competition for the public's business. There's a lot of competition. How do I make myself unique? How do I create opportunities for people to discover me and recognize my value, my worth, what I offer through my business, these kind of ideas. I think that if you're able to remember who you are and express it in your own unique way and have faith, trust, and courage to do that, that's a great place to start, because you can't poke any holes in something that authentic and that real. So our natural gifts may show up in very subtle ways, and we may not measure them up against other people's gifts that could be louder or perceived as being louder. It doesn't diminish them. It doesn't make them any less in any way, shape, or form in my eyes. So let's say you're the Oprah Winfrey of the fitness industry and host a lot of people and share great ideas.
Do you think people that you've worked with a whole list of very, very successful people, music, film, business, taken away, and I understand that a lot of those people, there's also vulnerabilities as well. But if we look at the positive part, their success, do you see what are the common traits that you recognize in terms of their talents? Because I guess if someone hasn't found that and they're looking at them, they look at themselves and say, okay, well, they have this, I don't have that. And it's always like this inferiority complex, this everybody's better than what I am, I don't have that. And I suppose, and I know a lot of them, also a lot of people do have these insecurities, but in general, do you feel that they've probably found something that they've connected with and own, and probably someone else that has probably got the same equivalent thing, but probably not the same, not different, not exactly the same, but they've not necessarily uncovered what that thing is for them? Does that make sense?
Yes. You could say this is a phrase that people might be familiar with, like ideas around being, an imposter or imposter syndrome, or not feeling worthy, or not feeling enough in some way, shape, or form. They're ideas that are confronted with the most successful people on the planet. But I just see them standing in their, you could say, in their power of them expressing their purpose, the reason why they're here. This is what I'm made to do, and that gives them the ability to fail and not see it in that comparison of win, lose, fail, succeed. It's like, this is direct feedback, and that is not going to dampen my enthusiasm for following my path. It's just feedback, so I see this as valuable information to make an adjustment. And then when you've got the ability to do that, to change your perspective of win, lose, fail, succeed, in reason, everything is based in reason and rationale and logic. Win, lose, fail, succeed, doesn't matter. It's all a lesson for me to keep stepping forward. So being comfortable with being uncomfortable, seeing setbacks, and when you haven't hit your mark, that you've had expectations, see it as a learning experience. Be comfortable with also feeling lonely sometimes, particularly if you're very successful. It's hard because the people that are willing to tell you the truth that list gets shorter and smaller. A lot of your interactions are around you saying no. Someone wants something from you. If you, particularly when you get to a certain crossroads, if you're coming from a creative place, and then you've got a financial piece, and we talked about this the other day, when you sort of kind of hit that cross section of like, I've got these financial responsibilities, but the creative piece of how I started the business and the first original intention I had, or that idea I wanted to share. Now we're coming to a sort of a place where what's more important: money, strategy, structure, power, lawyers, tax, or this creative expression, which is staying pure to the idea, or does the idea need to shift as the business is evolving? So the type of people that are able to be flexible and being open and positive, and also surrender to the things that they can't control, as we touched on before, they're the type of people that do well, that I see in business and stand the test of time. And sometimes delayed gratification, as we all know, is a very, very important one. But when we get a sort of a bone between our teeth and we get tenacious about something's like, I've got to win this battle. And zooming out, pausing for a second and zooming out, it's like, okay, so how am I going to win the war? That might be better as well. So using all those lenses to zoom in, zoom out, to pause. Also having a group that you can turn to and talk to, or a mentor or a coach, helpful. Someone that's neutral, somebody that is not incentivized by giving a certain type of information, someone that's got the ability to be direct and is coming from a positive place, and everyone realizes that.
When we last spoke, I very much came away with the feeling that remembering or rediscovering is essentially getting you to the starting line. Then that's when the real work starts. But it seems that there's a lot of work underneath the surface in terms of that discovery part, and even having this conversation in relation to the successful people, and there's I agree, there's so many different directions that you can go on this, but I suppose the fundamental thing that I'm trying to question, that I'm trying to answer, which I think you are, is look, that sort of work on remembering or rediscovering or trying to figure that out is a good place to start, because everything else that you're going to be doing, a lot of decisions that you can be making, you can be doing loads of different things, but you may be going in a lot of directions that may not necessarily, outside of a lesson, you may be better off like figuring out where you want to go first before you run off in a lot of different directions potentially. What do you think about that?
I don't think there's an absolute recipe for that. Sometimes chicken before the egg, or egg before the chicken. The idea of knowing yourself is really, I think it's a strong idea, and also recognizing how that relationship with yourself is prevalent in all your relationships in your life. And that is a sort of a fundamental lever that you can pull on and you can recognize. But whoever has the biggest imagination will be able to overcome all sorts of very difficult circumstances, and I keep returning to that. So knowing yourself is a really valuable thing, having more awareness of yourself, spending time, because all of our senses are directed outward, right? And you know how influenced we are just from day to day. Not even talking about your phone, but just walking on the street, right, and particularly here in Hollywood, you've got billboards everywhere, and even stickers on the back of the car in front of you, and so our attention has been taken in many, many directions all the time. So having the ability to harness that attention, and then to have a say on where you navigate it, and then create a place where it becomes so familiar that you can start to look inward for navigation, for a compass, for a direction. That idea that I shared before, that well-being or life is a feeling rather than a thinking, I think that helps once again, and all these ideas I share with you today is like they have been really helpful ideas that I have worked with for myself and worked with other people, but they're always evolving ideas, and there's always better ones just around the corner. So these are ideas that I'm sharing that are in transit. So up until now, they're the dominating idea, the most successful idea that I've seen. But it might just show up differently for every individual.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. And the way you put it is a better way that I've done it, because you're right. Just like that, you can end up confusing yourself, and you're raising more questions than you're solving. But I think, as you said, there's an idea, and this is probably the bit that will stick with me, and I'll continue to think about is to know the idea is if you can get to know yourself better, remember who you are, or discover, and there's some sort of work to figure that out, that will probably be better than not doing it.
Could be, from my experience. Yeah. But let's say if we talked about 4 sort of functional ideas, and those 4 ideas are going to mean many different things to many different people. So if we talked about knowing yourself, or introspection, or having more awareness of yourself, we talk about belonging, which is I've been thinking about that a lot this week for some reason. Belonging.
Is that because you're about to trek up the? What's the trail? Where are you going again? Just remind me.
I'm taking a group of people to Mount Kilimanjaro at the end of the month, and one of the things the reason why I wanted to do that is for myself. Like you write a book, you write it for yourself. It's like I wanted to have more adventure in my life, and I wanted to spend more time in nature. I mean, we have a property out in Pioneer Town near Joshua Tree in the desert, and
hopefully we're going then.
Later the year. It's off the grid in the middle of Bureau of Land Management on one side and National Forest on the other, and it's the middle of nowhere. It's off the grid, and that is an incredible place that I go for my own personal retreats with my family, and but I also take people there, and I was like, this is fantastic and amazing, but it also was taking me away from all these incredible adventure places around the world. And if I know who I am, 2 things that are big pieces of who I am is nature, and being in nature and going on an adventure. Big part of adventure is like when everything does go wrong and you don't know what's going on, but I love being in nature. And the other piece is to support and encourage people through ideas for them to do better in their own life. And those 2 things, like, these are things that I love. They're a part of me. I feel strongly that they're some of the reasons why I was created for. And I'm just going to go out in the world and start doing that. And who else would like to come? There's a lot to be said about going on a hike or trekking or going on an adventure. It's a lot like life. Walking down a trail, you stub your toe, or you trip over a rock, or you take a wrong turn. There's a lot of, you can see where there's a lot of parables to life, a lot of commonality. You walk along the trail with someone for a period of time. Maybe they go one way, you go the other. You think you're lost and everything's falling apart, and next thing you know, you stumble across a beautiful waterfall. You're walking with someone, you're talking about life, you're getting things off your chest. Left, right hemisphere, breathing, contracting, relaxing, anything, the heaviness in the body, any ideas or anything that is weighing you down is a great place to let go. You can stop and smell the roses. You can look at the beautiful nature, or you can have your head down. And there's a lot of comparisons to making a sort of a pilgrimage, or say going up a mountain like Mount Kilimanjaro to life. And it's a beautiful way for me to do something for myself, and also share that with other people. Share the things that I've discovered that have been very powerful. And you're never the same person when you go on a pilgrimage at the beginning as you are when you're coming down from a mountain. You always leave something up there in sort of like tribute leave a part of yourself that maybe has served its purpose. And then it opens up space for some new stuff to happen, or for you to actually revert or remember who you really are. And anything sort of standing in the way of that, you can get a little bit more clarity, a little bit more visibility on. And then when you do it with a group of people of like-minded sort of individuals, that collective experience, that social rafting together on that pilgrimage enhances it, takes it to another level, because even just sitting here and talking with you and knowing you and the stories of your life, the ones that I find most interesting are the ones, the archetypical sort of great mythologies of starting out and everything goes sideways, or something goes wrong, or you get lost, and then you find your way back in the path and you slay the dragon and you ride off into the sunset and do it all again. But those kind of stories, the ones that when things you discovered ways to overcome difficult circumstances, are really interesting to me, because if this life is a school, we're at the school of life. We've got plenty of opportunities in our life to experience adversity, or when things go terribly wrong, very, very difficult things happen. And then how do we move on? How do we go through? How do we discover? How do we learn? We've got many choices in the matter, or we can let it really weigh on us. And sometimes we do that for a period of time, and then shaking that off in some way, shape or form, or someone comes along into your life and just by the way that they are with you, it can shake that off.
Coming up next.
A lot of people have been talking about being present for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. It's the foundation of a lot of fundamental structured thought processes. Give yourself a second chance every single time. Give yourself a break. If you have a dream, it's very hard for someone to destroy a dream, particularly if you're supporting that dream with hope. I use prayer for many reasons. A lot of the time I use it to center myself. I use it to remind me of who I really am. I use it as a gateway to discover my way through different tricky situations.
What do you think about that? Like we mentioned at the beginning, the decision. You clearly went out to the desert and felt that you've got another mission or purpose or whatever you're doing. And when you referred to this hero's journey, my guess is that new mission that you've got, being out in nature, the new business opportunity, you're also going to go through that in some respect. But in order to go through that, have that lesson, become something different at the other side, there's a starting point. Part of that journey that I've had was that, in the way I sort of, the key point was that moment we had the conversation, the decision was made. And that was from a hike, actually, funny enough.
Powerful stuff.
How do you orchestrate, if you are sort of not even, if you're not going through that process at the moment, and if we accept that that's probably one of the things that we're here for, is to do things like that. How do you orchestrate that that start point, or do you look at where you are and say, well, you're already in it, and you've just got to recognise that, and get into your story and have a different perspective on kind of where you are? How do you see those two things? Because I suppose there's an excitement of the way you're explaining it. You either look at your life and think this is really tough, or you're in this exciting story.
I often, and my wife and I have a sort of a little in-house joke, as we say, that's exciting instead of it's terrible, or sometimes some things are terrible, really difficult and hard. But the idea of exciting, it creates a little bit more fluidity around it doesn't always have to be like this. This too will pass. It's like a little reminder. This too will pass. You could argue we're from the moment of birth to death, we're on a journey, and we're taking a step in a direction, and the awareness of that, the finite nature of our life, for me, what it does is it gives me every opportunity to remember that I'm here for this period of time, and I can share my gifts with the world, and I can, it's a wild time to be alive, and it's a wild moment in history right now, and I'm excited to contribute from me being myself, something positive that may, if I'm able to touch one person in my whole life, then that's a positive thing. If I could touch one person, that's a gift, that's a positive thing. And I know people in my life, many people with just a passing comment or a glance have touched me in my life. And it can be very, very powerful and positive. And it doesn't matter if you get the most qualified person, a huge expert in their field that has got an incredible amount of wisdom. If that person on the other end of the conversation isn't open, willing or ready, or it's not their right time, there's no listening. So it's got a lot to do with where you are, right time, right place, your openness. There's a lot of dynamics going on. So life is coming in and out of balance. We're constantly coming in, coming out of balance. We're recognizing if we're out of balance or not. That's why I'm really a big fan of going inwards and just spending time with having an understanding of like, I feel out of place, or I feel really in place. What does that mean?
Out of place or in place, yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I've been using that idea of belonging a lot. Do I belong in my body today? And you could say that feels, I feel good in my body. I feel like I feel in right relationship with my body. Do I feel like I belong in my mind? Am I having thoughts that are kind of like kicking me out a little bit, or maybe self-deprecating, or not being too nice with yourself? Maybe being harsh on yourself. Do I belong in my closest relationships? Do I feel like I belong? Do they feed me? Do they help me thrive and flourish? Do I belong in my career, my work, or my life, or where I live, in my city, in my community, in the state, in the country? It's really good questions to ask, because we move at such a fast rate. We're constantly moving, playing catch up. We've got so many different things that we have to be aware of. Finding a way to interweave that is really helpful, and a lot of people, I feel for them, because they've got a lot of responsibility in their life, and they've got a lot of rivers that are coming out from them that are feeding different, whether it's their children or if it's through their work. They've got a lot of rivers coming out from them. So I would suggest that you could be effective at being a source for people close to you, or people that you affect through ripples through your actions, if you're able to give to yourself first. So if you can spend time having sort of an understanding of yourself, you will understand better how you can support, love, appreciate, respect, be kind, patient, all those kind of great ideas with yourself. That might be a good place to start. And then it comes full circle and you do it again. So you go through that, and then you get really good at it and get really consistent and really dialed in, and then you come out of balance, and then you're thinking to yourself, you're feeling like you need to come back into balance. That's okay.
You use the word awareness, and we chatted a couple of times about alcohol, and you said, well, why are you stopping drinking? And it was a bit about just to be a bit more aware, because I have a thing about alcohol, and not to say I'm not going to drink it again, but I feel that it can become a little bit of a crutch. And if it gets to a certain time at the weekend and it's okay, well, I'm basically checking out, because you have a drink and you don't have to think, you're not conscious, you don't have to, it fills time for you, it creates entertainment. Whereas when you're not drinking, it's definitely more work if whether you're in a social situation or whatever. You're more conscious, you're more aware. I certainly find I'm forced to be more present. And in some cases, like, actually, do I like being present or don't I? And I think probably in some cases you do it because being present, you prefer not to be present because it's harder work and you kind of really question what you're doing. And but since I've done it and since our conversation, I feel the more present you can be, at some point, time slows down a little bit, and before your instant response or before you say anything, you're actually thinking a little bit more. It's like, oh, I was just about to say that, but now I've actually stopped myself. What's your thoughts on awareness, presence, and how that plays into the conversation we're having now?
I think it's a good thing. It's a really good thing. You know, a lot of people have been talking about being present for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. It's the foundation of a lot of fundamental structured thought processes, maybe religion, maybe things like Buddhism, which is a practice. It's a foundation for our ancestors been using it for a long time, so it's a good thing. In our life today, that's where I'm really interested in, is like, what's the idea that would be helpful today? You know, so the idea of telling someone to go on a retreat or step out of their life in some way, shape or form might be really difficult. It might be difficult for them to be able to get that kind of time away or time out. It also might be difficult for someone to be able to just dedicate any resources outside of their day-to-day for something that is an idea that could benefit them, but they'd have to get some practice in and some consistency about whatever technique they use, whether it's breath work or meditation or talking to a therapist, whatever that is. It can show up in many ways. So the easiest way that I see, and simple and easy is best, is like walking in nature, like going for a walk in the park or going for a little hike or something. It's a good time for you just to pause what's going on in your regular life and just check in with how you're feeling. And then when you're coupling that with ideas around giving to yourself, like being supportive for yourself, because understanding that if I take care of myself, then I've got more resources to help other people, then that idea in itself will help you then have more room in your cup to respond rather than react, like you said. So let's say I'm feeling overwhelmed. I haven't had a holiday in a long time. I've got some things that are very important to me going on that are starting to veer in a direction that makes me nervous or concerned or fearful, worried. I'm not feeling like I'm doing what I want to do. There's a whole host of things that could be going on in your life that you'd like to change. But having more resources through self-care or through having more awareness of how things feel and adding an extra intuition or instinct or gut feeling or kind of getting a read on what you're giving your heart a voice in the matter, these kind of things will just help you in your life and your everyday life and help you take steps, positive steps towards what you want, rather than, like I suggested with that idea that has been helpful for me and many others that I've worked with, is rather than going away from what you don't want, what does it look like you're going towards what you do want? And even understanding what it is that you want is helpful.
I think sometimes that presence, as I mentioned, can be, I don't know what your experience is, but sometimes it can be scary to just, when you're not being distracted by your phone. I think a phone is almost another form of like alcohol, because if you're present, you haven't got anything to do. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to distract my thoughts and just scroll through Instagram or something. It's another way of just distracting your mind and not being present. And suddenly you can burn 2 hours in the evening going through YouTube or whatever, just Is it? Do you think is it good to? And do you have any techniques, if it is good, to just be with yourself and your own thoughts without having to pick up something or drink something or watch something, whatever?
Yeah, I'm going to sound like a broken record, nature.
Nature.
Yeah, I love just going into nature, even just going down the beach. You know, water is representative of emotion. It's a great place to let go of some heavy emotions or negative emotions. Or going for a hike on the trail or walk in the park or taking the dog for a walk. You know, it's highly, highly, highly inconvenient to be with some of those thoughts. It's very difficult, particularly if they've got high priorities in what's going on in your life or importance to you. Sometimes they're very, very harsh. They're spoken with a voice that you wouldn't speak to, like one of your worst enemies with. You know, that's how harsh we are on ourselves sometimes. So, being with yourself, I take a big pinch of salt with that idea. So, being with yourself, make it really easy, simple, lighthearted. Give yourself a second chance every single time. Give yourself a break. It's okay to give those feelings and those thoughts that are going on with you, give them some space and acknowledge them. You could, if you wanted to go deeper into it, if you're talking about the idea of shadow work, they've all, you know, sometimes we lock things up in a basement and they come out at the most inconvenient time and we sabotage ourselves. Or we behave in ways that are not really representative of who we really are, but this pain or this trauma or this thing that we're maybe a little bit stuck around is having its way, kicking up a storm and hijacking us. So being with yourself, maybe you can start off like really easy and just go for a walk in nature and just see how you're feeling in the day. See how you're feeling and see how you're feeling about what's going on in your life and see where you can discover ways to do better for yourself and for the others involved in the circumstance. But small steps and having support, super valuable. You know, having a platform for you to build your day around, which is involving making sure that you've got all the resources you need to function, whether it's exercise, nutrition, sleep. Two biggest things, as you know, is, you know, am I dehydrated or am I lacking sleep, or the quality of sleep good? So they're really great foundations. You can build on that. Supplementation, you can build on that. Recovery, you know, ice baths or sauna or infrared or acupuncture, whatever it is that works for you. Then you start to, does this work for me, or am I doing it because everyone else is doing it? That's another level where you can just distinguish between. It's like discernment. Like, this feels good for me. Everyone else is doing high intensity training and then ice baths, but it doesn't work for me at all. I like going for a sunset walk on the beach and putting my feet up and having, you know, a good chat. You know, that could be equally as good.
How do you relate to your thoughts? Because within a day, I could go out for a run and have just these amazing ones when I'm running or working out and great ideas. And then within a similar 24-hour period, depending on what's happening in my life, but if I'm under pressure, I could then wake up in the same day, in the middle of the night, and have totally the opposite thoughts that just, I'm like, this is the terrible time for me to start thinking about this. How do you relate to them in terms of making sure that you're using them, not your thoughts using you?
There's so many brilliant, smart people that I've engaged with their work, and I stand on the shoulders of giants all the time. So the ideas that I'll share are ideas that I felt useful, but there are also been ideas that incredible people have used as well. So the idea of, okay, so I'm not going to solve this right now because it's the middle of the night. So if I take these thoughts off like a jacket and put it on the coat hanger and put it in the cupboard and put put it away for now. It'll still be there in the morning. Also, this too will pass is another very helpful tool. Like, things are going fantastic, this will pass. Things are very difficult for me right now, this too will pass. That's another thing to remind yourself, that it allows hope. One thing that stood out for me recently when I was sitting on my thinking bench out in the desert.
Thinking bench.
I'll introduce you to the thinking bench. Sitting on this bench, and I just look at nature, I watch nature, and quite often that's when I do my best thinking. It's only bad thought if I make it bad. And it's only a good thought if I make it a good thought. And that was really interesting. It just returns the power to me in understanding that if I'm making this a bad thought or a heavy, worrisome, fearful line of thinking, that ends up being like an echo chamber in my mind, or every 15 minutes, if it's very intense, it comes around like the orbit of a planet around a star, and then it comes back again, and then maybe it speeds up, or something's distracting me and it slows down, and it keeps coming around. It could be based in expectation, like I expected it to go this way. It could be something that reminds me of a very painful time, and there's echoes of that. Sometimes when you're in your thoughts and by yourself, and that echo chamber keeps bouncing around these thoughts, then they become sometimes increasingly bizarre, or maybe more intense, or you've got nostalgia, which is something that I definitely would like to mention, as nostalgia is a big thing. It's like sometimes we're measuring up to ideas that were based in a past tense, and they're not current with who we are today and what we really want, but we're still maybe hanging on to that idea. There's so many dynamics at play, So the freedom that we can discover through that last idea that I said is like, they're only bad if I make them bad, and they're only good if I make them good. Then I'm the one that's making them. Then I have more of a say in the matter. This too will pass, or I'm just going to take these thoughts off of me now and put them away for now, because I'm not enjoying myself. I'm not having a good time. It's not productive. But I really encourage people not to hold this stuff in, to share it with someone that is meaningful for them. Another way, if you don't have anyone that you feel that way about, or that you don't have someone like that in your life, is you can journal, and you can. I encourage people I work with to do voice memos, and if it's a story, let's say it's a story about something that went really terribly wrong, or there's betrayal. Betrayal's a big one, It's like particularly when someone who's meaningful to you behaved in a way that really upset you or hurt you. Or if you're going through a crisis, or you can't really get your head above water long enough to catch your breath. Or if there's a lot of balls in the air, these kind of things. Talking that story, because it's a story that we're holding out in the voice memo, and then listening to it back, it does shift your perspective in it. And it might just give you access to a little bit more hope around that story, and you can find a way there where you maybe take a step back, or you zoom out, or you're detached a little bit, and then you've got the ability to be a little bit more creative, and that's where the solution is going to come from, is being creative. And the foundation of that comes from you being able to understand who you are and what resources you need to find a way back to your center, find a way back into alignment, find a way back to who you really are, finding a way back to belonging in your body. All these ideas are, I kind of just pull one word out and slot another word in, and just use that as an access to give a little bit of a fresh idea.
One of the things I've been working on, based on a number of conversations I've had with people for a while, is recreating beliefs that serve you. Because the thing that seemed to drop with me, as I've spoke to a number of different people about this, even like performance sports coaches and that is a lot of time. Well, from what I've seen, is the way you look at the situation is generally not true, because you're thinking about things that are not yet happened, and so you're basically constructing a story, and quite an extravagant story, but it's just literally a story. And the meaning that you put to it is also not true. So the first part that I've come to understand is nothing that you think is true if it's about what's happening in the future. Okay, that's that. And so what does that mean? Well, in a lot of times, I certainly think for myself, and I've got kids that do sports as well, is so now what you're doing is you're creating a story that actually isn't serving the goal. And why you've done that, I don't know, but we all do it. So now you've created a story that's not actually helping you, and it's not true, and it's not helping you. And you've got a choice to create another story that also isn't true, but this one could help you, and this one couldn't. So why not just make up stories that are actually going to help you? If you're going to make them up, why not do that? And I know you. Again, this could be a very, very deep topic, and you could really question it. But on a very simple level, I was curious because I myself, certainly in key situations, I'm creating stories, feeling pretty crappy about the stories that I'm telling myself in my own head, not constructive. And if I probably changed something and pretended I was someone else and I had certain capabilities and superpowers, it would probably be much more fun. Is that something you've thought about? Is that something you talk about? And where do you stand on that idea?
Tom Petty had a great line in the song, "Most things that I worried about never happened anyway." And I think a little bit of humor is what I guess I'm injecting there when you're approaching that, because we get so serious about life, and sometimes it takes away the fun and the playfulness of it. And when you're being playful and having fun, even in the face of something that's very heavy and very difficult, that does open up more space and more freedom for you to shift your perspective or shift that moment in time that you find yourself. If it's a heavy moment in time, if you're feeling like you've got up to your knees in a swamp, or up to your waist into a swamp, or up to your neck in a swamp. So seeing if you can take life with a pinch of salt, to the best of your ability, be positive through your thoughts, words, and actions. To also allow life to happen. If you think about so many times when we're bumping up against life, the protagonist, the villain, is the circumstance that is not in alignment with our expectation. So being flexible with that is helpful. Reaching out to your community, to your friends, support, super powerful, super important. We're made for a collective experience. So sharing ideas, collaborating with someone, being playful, supporting each other, encouraging each other, clapping when someone's having a win in their life, things are going well. And being there, supportive and encouraging when they may be on one knee catching their breath because they got the wind knocked out of them. So social rafting, super important. Sometimes just getting out of your head in the best way that is possible for you. Like I discussed, going to nature, or going to a racetrack and driving a car real fast might be your thing. That'll make you present, that's for sure, in that moment, in those moments. So doing things that will shake you up and help you step out of that headspace. Those other ideas we talked about before, helpful, about this too will pass. I'm the one that's deciding whether this is good or bad. These different ways of thinking sometimes are thrust upon us and we feel helpless or hopeless in them. And I'm suggesting that it doesn't have to be that way, that you can discover a way. I am ambitious for you. I'm supportive and encouraging for you. And these ideas may be helpful, or you'll discover your own ideas through your experience that will help give you a little bit of space for you to catch a breath and then to see that there is hope. And I watched this show on Netflix last week, and it really captured me. It's called The Sandman, and it's about the Lord of Dreams. And there's this section in and that series, this little part where the Lord of Dreams meets the devil, Lucifer, and they have a duel, and this duel is based on ideas, and Lucifer starts the duel with the Lord of Dreams, and she is a female in this series that's Lucifer, a woman. And she starts out with, I'm a dire wolf, and that is her first sort of advance, and then biting, murderous dire wolf, and then the Lord of Dreams says, I'm a hunter on a horse, and that is dire wolf killing, and then she comes back and I'm a serpent, that is a horse biting serpent, and then he comes back and they're going back and forth. And the very last piece, the reason why I'm bringing this up is she says, I'm anti-life. It keeps escalating. She says, I'm anti-life, the end of all life. And he's lying on the floor affected by this idea. That's how the duel was going. And he raises his head and he says, I am hope. So for me, it was very powerful. And the reason why I'm sharing that idea is because dreams, for one, if you have a dream, it's very hard for someone to destroy a dream, particularly if you're supporting that dream with hope. And hope is something that allows us to stand in the face of adversity in very difficult times when things may not be going in your favor, and to recognize that it's not always going to be this way. So being hope is a very powerful thing. Being love is a very powerful thing. You could, in any circumstance, you can ask love, what would love do now? Or what would hope do in this circumstance? So you can start to create an identity. You know, I've talked about the power of identity, particularly in a business. Like if you have a business and you're all talking about this business, but you don't give the business a voice. So give the business an identity and a voice and ask it what it needs to thrive and flourish. You can be hope, you can be love, you can be courage, you can be these things in moments that you may not be feeling as strong as you possibly could be. And that may bolster you to face that difficult circumstance or that adversity. So these are many ideas that you can be playful with. These are some of the ideas that people have shared with me or told me that have led to them starting a conversation with themselves that have just opened things up, particularly in some of their hardest times. And then there's a lot of wisdom and a lot of strength that comes out of those moments, and then you can be grateful in a certain way when you've got enough distance between you and the event to look back and say, that was really hard, that was really difficult. And there was moments in there where I wasn't as sure of myself as I normally could have been. But it has given me a sense of strength and endurance and durability to stand in the face of adversity. So the next time it comes around, maybe I'm feeling a little bit more optimistic than I had done in the past because of that experience.
When you're talking about well-being and your, I guess your, what would you call it? Your brand name, the Wellbeing Manager.
Yeah.
It's obviously something that's you believe in as an idea. Does some of the things that we're talking about create these, I suppose, blockages to well-being? I was listening to one of the interviews on the way up here today, and you were referring to certain blockages, and the blockages can create issues, disease, or what have you. And I suppose whether it's in your head or in your body, if you've got these maybe misalignments that could affect general well-being, whether it affects your sleep or your thinking or whatever. So how do you, when you're looking at someone, because you've got experience from being a physical trainer to I suppose would you call it a mental, spiritual trainer? You touch all those points, but how do you look at it and connect it, and how do you sort of identify some of those areas that may be not necessarily flowing correctly and improve somebody's total well-being?
So if we subscribe to the idea that as above, so below, sort of the way that we're feeling inside of ourselves will be reflected or mirrored outside of ourselves. So if I said you're going towards what you want versus going away from what you don't want, let's say if someone was doing this to avoid, I don't know, illness or injury, or going away from the idea that they don't feel like they belong because they're maybe overweight and they don't feel good about themselves and their group of friends may not accept them. Now, that's going to have a heavy impact on just the way you carry yourself and walk around with those thoughts in your life, day to day. So the idea of mind, body, soul, heart, all these ideas and them being in coherence and being in alignment, that's going to take you towards good things. And that'll be reflected in the choices you make in your thoughts, your words and actions. So if you're feeling like you're being extreme with your exercise, that might be in compensation for something that where you're feeling less than or lack of. There could be a relationship there. It could be the fact that you've got an idea that you could play around with that might give you a little bit more freedom to, rather than punish yourself through exercise or nutrition or fasting or ice bathing or plant medicine, whatever it is. Are you punishing yourself because you don't feel enough, so you're making these choices to go away from what you don't want? Or are you going towards the stuff that's really good for you? And to distinguish that, I think that's a part of the roadmap for you to continually be stepping towards your well-being. And it's such an individual thing. It's a subjective thing. Like your well-being and someone else's well-being is different. But it's good to support each other in that, and it's good to share ideas and to show people how other people have done it and discovered it or rediscover it when they've lost it. I think that's an important piece maybe we don't talk about too much, is rediscovering your well-being when you've lost it, how hard that is. Like you've had a back injury, you had an illness, you had a surgery, you lost a family member, someone really close to you. You just got out of your rhythm. And this moment in time took you away from those foundational activities that have supported you for a long time. And then to find your way back to them takes a lot of courage and strength, particularly when you start to getting around our age and older. I can understand really easily someone that was super fit and healthy when they were younger, and then when they start to get some life under their belt and life happens, then that's not the case. I can understand that. You see a lot of these actors, musicians that were really young and beautiful, and they were doing that as a part of their image, and then once they're out of the public eye, then they just let all that go. It's really interesting.
You've seen people that have been there and also been back and there and back again, I'm sure. But when you assess that whole situation, do you see that generally, if working on some of these points and principles that we've spoken about, there's a lot of stuff, but I think you know what I'm referring to, working on some of the principles that you teach and coach. Do you find that that's almost kind of like the linchpin to getting a lot of the other bits in place? So let's say the scenario with the actor, they were young, they were beautiful, they were successful, and then things changed, they maybe got a divorce, they went off the rails, etc., and then trying to get people back together again, even though they're not necessarily that young and beautiful person anymore. If you're working on the mind, the heart, the spirit, and connecting people, but they can be back to, I suppose, beyond where they are. But that's almost the trigger to get all those other things back in line again. Do you understand that?
Yeah, the way that I would approach it, I think that's a renovation of what winning looks like.
a renovation of what we're in?
Winning looks like, yeah. So winning looks different now.
Okay.
And that is just, it's a huge freeing idea. Like winning looks different. So when you were before, that idea was maybe nostalgic or that was appropriate then. Now winning looks different from who you are, where you are in your journey today. So that's a really great way to hop, skip and jump over a bunch of things that could slow you right down.
And do you think that, just to jump in on that one, do you think that, as best as you know, is a kind of a truth that, well, maybe when we weren't as aware, when we were younger or whatever, about what that should be? And I know everything's unique for all of us, but do you think that sort of awareness is almost like a bit of a maturity, and it's a fairly universal principle that in most cases, if you've got some of those things correct, that that you're generally going to be in a better place if you're working on those, like working on yourself and things. Do you think, because there's a lot of stuff you can talk about, whether it's health, fitness, nutrition, and a lot of them can be generally debated, and everybody's quite different really from that respect. But when it comes to some of the things like we're talking about here, like your mental, spiritual, you use your own words, but it seems fairly consistent to a lot of people I talk to that most of physical performance and relationships and everything start really within your own head. And some people get to a certain stage because they're working against something, again, away from something, but it's been this engine to get them successful. And they reach a point where they turn and then they're moving towards it. But they always seem to kind of have this similar realization. And when they get to that, they just have a very different outlook on life.
Yeah, reckoning. Life will give us plenty of reckonings if we want them. So you have that moment, whether it's a rock bottom or something happened dramatically that changed your circumstance, and then change is kind of ushered in, not on your terms.
Yeah.
And then, being nimble and being flexible, being young at heart with the way that you approach and being open, being positive, these kind of things are helpful. But the recognizing, it as a part of your journey, finding a way to learn from the experience, trying to step away from the polarity of good or bad or right or wrong, and seeing the responsibility that we can take on that part of the journey that got us there, and where if we like to do it differently, where we can. So see if we can be constructive with it as a positive thing. But also, sometimes it's just a return of people recognize who they are and they start to be less influenced by outside sources and start to be more influenced by the path of your heart, or listening to your heart, or listening to your gut, or listening to your intuition, or not being caught up with looking over your shoulder what anyone else is doing, and you're following, your eyes are front and center and you know where you're going. You've got clarity and vision about where you're going. So all those ideas can be fruitful around knowing yourself or having, and like I said, sometimes it can be really uncomfortable and really inconvenient, particularly if you're going through a life-changing time. Some things have happened where you're out of your comfort zone, or they're unfamiliar, or they're against your will, or in direct competition with your expectations. All those ideas can be a wonderful pivot point in your life. And then when there's, like I suggested before, when there's enough space between you and what happened, you can look back and say, I can draw a line. That's like a timeline moment in my life where I made a clear pivot in a different direction. And they can be really valuable. Or we can continue to just keep banging our head against the wall and expect a different result, and it doesn't happen, and we keep rewounding ourselves and getting hurt or sad, and we find ourselves in a loop until we don't want to do it anymore because we're sick. We get sick of it or make ourselves sick. And a lot of times the reason why I suggest going inwards is really valuable is because when we are in touch with what's good for us and our feelings, using those resources, those extra resources on top of our five senses that we have, then that helps us not to go against ourselves. Because sometimes we go against ourselves, and we do that, and that's okay. So going with yourself, I feel it's easier.
You mentioned about plant medicines, and I was wondering your view of psychedelics to assist in getting you, I suppose, getting yourselves out of the moment and exploring other things. Do you think that they are moving you away from what you don't want or towards a direction that you want to go, or is that dependent on how you go into the process?
So the reason why you're doing it is really important. I think they can be super helpful. Yeah, like anything. They can be super helpful. It could be destructive as well. It could be it's something that is maybe giving you too much information. It's crazy. Sometimes you can get too much information about a situation, and it kind of makes it even more difficult as well. It's more confusing. But I found them to be very, very powerful and helpful for me. I studied with Alberto Villoldo in late 1999 into early 2000s, and then I went.
Who is that?
He wrote a book called Shaman Healer Sage, and he had a curriculum called the Four Winds Society. He does, and that I was fascinated by. Growing up, I was like really fascinated with National Geographic, and I was fascinated with Indigenous cultures and how they approached life and their myths, the myths that they would tell, and their belief systems, and their connection and relationship with nature. All of that was really fascinating for me. And around about this time, I was in the UK. I was writing for a national newspaper called the Sunday Times when newspapers were really big, and I was writing articles about well-being and health and fitness, and then I started to be influenced by Indigenous cultures and really understanding how they approached sort of well-being. You had to look at a sort of a culture like, let's say, Chinese culture, and the way they approach their sort of well-being. It's a full spectrum. They'd have sort of philosophy like Taoism or like Confucianism. They would have the ability to help someone's body through acupuncture or Tui Na or acupressure or gua sha, which is Graston technique in the West, or cupping. They would have breath work and qigong and movement. They would have Chinese herbs. They could take your pulse and prescribe herbs that would bring you back into balance.
When you say that, it's quite amazing how
They had a full, a full suite of a complete system that you can sort of walk into, and it will cover all the different areas of your life.
Wow. I've heard everything you've said, well, pretty much most of them I've heard before, but I suppose I've not connected all that together and thought that is kind of like a system that's been around for probably hundreds or maybe even thousands of years.
You can take a jump just across the border into India, same thing. Ayurvedic medicine. They have Panchakarma, which is overturning, bringing back into balance. So it's a series of Ayurvedic treatments that help your body come back into balance. The same kind of thing, taking your pulse, looking at your tongue, and prescribing herbs and treatments to bring you back into balance. And then they have breath work. They have yoga. They have many very wise and ancient philosophies. You know, Hinduism, I think, is one of the oldest, if not the oldest religion, going back over 5,000 years. I've got wonderful stories. Both the cultures, Chinese and Indian, are very big family orientated. So they social rafting and looking after each other in tight units, respecting the elders and supporting the elders in their older years, having them in the home, both characteristics. So both those cultures, when I was younger, were fascinating to me. So I started to really look into every Indigenous culture that I came across, and just like a sponge absorbing myself into it, because I felt like look, they were doing this for a long time. It was this successful for a long time, and we've had a short period of time where we're bringing other ideas, and I think there's a place for all of them. But these ancient cultures, they kind of had it worked out for a long time.
You would think so, considering, like, I suppose our culture is seen to be the sort of leading.
Yeah, the pinnacle.
Yeah, it's like, well, what's our equivalent?
Yeah.
I'm sure there are some, but is there is there
Western, well, you could say
ours medicine?
physiotherapy.
Right.
You could say allopathic medicine, sort of. You could say antibiotics. You could say all these other millions of other.
Do you think it's more of a medicine-based solution to more of compared to some of those more natural?
I think there's a place for them to walk hand in hand.
Yeah.
I think the old and the new. So around about that time, I was very interested in shamanism. I was a sensitive young boy growing up. I was always loved to be in nature. I always loved the idea of magic and, auspiciousness or serendipities or synchronicities, these kind of things that were maybe a part of the natural world, but not as spoken into awareness in the West as in other cultures. So Dr. Alberto Villoldo was a student of a lineage of the Inca medicine men and women in the high Andes, the Quechua people, that when the conquistadors came, they went right up into the very high Andes to preserve their traditions and their ceremonies and their belief systems and their practices, because they were persecuted, and you know how that story goes. So they protected their lineage, and they started to come down, I believe in the 80s and the 90s, come down and started to share it with people that were not from that region and that area. And they had a vision, they had a dream as a part of helping humanity was to induct Western shamans and Western medicine men and women with their traditions to help them share their indigenous psychology and belief systems and practices and their perspectives that would help the West. So that was something that was fascinating for me. And as a part of going through his curriculum, he would take people to Peru, and it was 2003 I went to the Amazon with that group, and we did ayahuasca ceremonies over the course of a week. And that was before, I had only discovered ayahuasca in like 2000 and learned about it and its capacities.
What was your first experience like?
It was wild. It was wild, but I was, approaching it sort of perfectly. I was in the perfect lotus, and I drank twice as much as anyone else. And, I'm in the Amazon, sitting on the banks of a river underneath the full moon, and I'm taking ayahuasca, and I'm, having all these sort of ideas and thoughts, and it had a very limiting effect on me when I was like that.
Limiting?
I wasn't relaxed and open. It was more me trying to control the circumstance. So after that wasn't successful, then the next night I approached it a little bit more relaxed, and by the third night I just lied back on my sleeping bag under the stars, and I just let it take me, and I finally surrendered. And that's when those experiences, I'm still making sense of them today. Yeah. So and then many other experiences with DMT.
Was it a scary experience in any way? Or?
Well, if my safety was required for me to be in control of the situation, yes, because I was not in control. And it's one of the most wonderful, liberating things is the surrender and the letting go. And then there were some things about those that over the course of those weeks there and those experiences that really opened me up and were very, very positive. But at the same time, the ayahuasquero, the shaman running the ceremony, very, very excellent. He's passed, no longer with us. Maestro Panduro, but an incredible ayahuasquero who had you could say that you either learn from in an apprenticeship to become an ayahuasquero, or you are informed and taught by the plant itself. So you just go into the jungle, do ayahuasca for every day over a long period of time, a couple of years or longer, and come out with a structured way of approaching people in that fashion, in, like you could describe it as indigenous psychology. They have a framework that has been informed by medicine, by plants, by the spirit of the plant. That's the way that they help people, and then they help people working with ayahuasca and holding the space for them. So that is one of the ways. Bufu, which is another one that has been very powerful in my life, which is DMT-5-MeO, which is a slightly different experience. It's the mucus on the back of the toad, I believe it's Mexico, that they're indigenous to, and they harvest that and you smoke it, and it's a much shorter experience. It's only 20-30 minutes, but that's an incredible, powerful experience that can shock you out of maybe being stagnant in your thinking and your being. Psilocybin, the same kind of thing. All those things can be a great catalyst, but if you're doing it for the right reason, you're doing it with someone that's experienced, you're doing it with a group of people that are your kind of frequency, your kind of vibe, positive people, you're doing it in a safe place. And the source of the medicine is very good and high integrity. And then you've got on the back end, which a lot of people don't talk about, is then having the support to process and integrate the experience. But it's no good if it just stays in that experience. Like, how can you turn that corn into bread, or turn it into food? How can you turn that experience with medicine into actually something that is practically and realistically in your life going to help things move in a positive direction? So a big piece of that, like I said, is processing and integrating, and sometimes someone that is skilled at supporting and holding a container for someone to explore those things is good, or someone goes away and journals by themselves about their experience and then refers back to it, and they are able to see things from a slightly different vantage point. It's like climbing up a mountain and watching a sunrise one day, and then the next day you move camp, and then that same sunrise looks different because you're in a different place on the mountain.
How do those things come to you? Are they like thoughts and ideas that you have shifts on? Are they visual things that you see, or does it depend on the person?
In regards to how people...
So if you go through, like you did the ayahuasca, the toad, like when you go through that process, are you actually seeing things that are giving you messages, or are these ideas and these thoughts coming to you that you're thinking in a different way? How, or is it difficult to explain how you receive?
It's very, very difficult to explain. I've heard so many people tell me so many different stories of how they've experienced it. And I can give you an example of how I personally, but I can't really speak to the experience that you're going to have if that's what you feel as though is the best thing for you to, on your path, on your journey. It's become something that I feel is people pay a little bit too much attention to, from my perspective, rather than the actual, the work and then the integrating and the processing. It's kind of like, it's focusing on this bit of equipment rather than the goal is to be healthy and well. Mm-hmm. Maybe focusing a little bit too much on the thing rather than the real thing. But in itself, it can do everything from help someone overcome a sticking point that has been really, really difficult because they were stuck around a meaning that they had created, or they have some flexibility in changing the story, or they were shown something that sparked or ignited something within them that caused them to start to do something differently in their life. Could be giving them just access to more information that gives them a little bit more peace of mind, gives them a little bit more of a cathartic experience, a soothing experience, that they can take a deep exhalation and relax in their life, and it doesn't have to be such high anxiety or tension or pressure. Could be a space that they discover where they're allowing themselves to forgive themselves or to forgive someone else. So the opportunity for you to shift and change from those experiences, if it's done in the right way with the type of container that I described. And there's many other things that I'm sure I'm forgetting that a lot of other people that have got a lot of experience with this. I don't take people on medicine journeys. I do this for myself. And I have done, for, what are we now, coming into 20 years for myself. And I don't take people on medicine journeys because there's specific people that's what they do and that's all they do. And they're the type of people I'd suggest that you're going with. But my experience from it is that it has been a wonderful little boost at times to help me find my way back onto my path, or to open my path up, or to give me some clarity or perspective, or to help with me being more relaxed about life.
We kind of touched on the word faith, and I guess it's difficult to say that without bringing into conversation religion.
God.
And I was listening to an interview you did with a joint friend of ours, Troy Casey. You did a live podcast with him, and he was talking about how he sort of reconnected with prayer, and for a number of different reasons. But the way you guys spoke about it wasn't necessarily, although you said it could be God, but it was using it in a slightly different way. Mm-hmm. Where do you put that in your life? Because it's a very, I suppose when you say religion, instantly that divides all of us. Mm-hmm. Instead of, my guess is what the intention for a lot of these is to bring everybody together in some respect, but it generally puts people into different camps. Well, this is your crew and this is my crew. So where do you see, I suppose, that faith, meaning belief in something that you can't explain, but in a lot of cases it can serve you in a positive way if used correctly, and how how you approach both the faith and the prayer conversation that you had recently with Troy.
So prayer has been a very valuable thing that I was aware of growing up, and I grew up Catholic and saying your prayers, and I didn't understand it as a technology.
Technology.
Yeah, it totally is. It's a quantum technology. I didn't understand it as that. So the way I refer to it as a quantum technology, prayer is you can ask for help in your life, and you can ask for forgiveness in your life. You can ask for all of your life to recognize you as someone that is grateful for all the things that are going on in your life. And these are forces that you can evoke and bring into your life that will support you and help you in your life. And the idea of, I was listening to another podcast, and it was interesting. They were talking about the secret and, abundance and manifesting and these kind of things. I feel that there's a certain, there's a reality where that can exist, and that can, if you say it into being and say it with enough conviction and enough belief, you can evoke that into being, for sure. But you're also recognizing that, is that good for you, and is that on your path? Mm. Is that a true expression of yourself? Is that what you really want, or is that what other people want?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Yeah. A lot of times someone said to me, I'm glad a lot of the things I wanted to come true in my life didn't.
Yeah. Be careful what you wish for, right? Yeah. It's very interesting. But so I use prayer for many reasons. A lot of the time I use it to center myself. I use it to remind me of who I really am. I use it as a gateway to discover my way through different different tricky situations.
Like guidance, would you say?
I would say what it does is it puts me into a place where I feel at home, and I feel that I can then be creative and I can dream a different reality, or dream a reality where it all comes together and it can fit in, or I can find peace, or I can be in right relationship with what's going on. It gives me it's like a superpower for me. In the back of my mind right now, I'm praying, and it's just such a habit that has been instilled in me for so long that it gives me a serenity or an anchor or a groundedness. It gives me a lot of things. And sometimes people like to hear positive words pulled together like in a prayer that will help them revitalize or renew their own faith. Now, when you talk about the bigger conversation around God, is when you start to spend time thinking about these big questions: why are we here? What am I made for? What is the reason we're here? What am I here to do? These kind of things. I think that conversation begs for other conversations to go alongside that. Like, is there a God, or where is God, or what is God? And how does God relate to me, or how do I relate to God? And what is God in itself, and that word, what does that mean? So there's a lot of things that you can use to start to discover for yourself. How does that feel for you, rather than looking towards anyone else to tell you what it is? So your faith is your faith. Your belief is your belief, or your knowing is your knowing. So if you're discovering your way through life, and you're having these kind of conversations, these bigger conversations, I feel as though that's a part of our birthright, a part of our journey as human beings, to explore that and to discover that. And the last thing I feel that any of the religions were created to do was create separation. I don't believe that for a second. So if something is repelling you away from, another person, or causing this conflict, or I don't know how valuable interacting with it in that way is. I question that. But at the same time, if it's something that's being positive for you and positive in your life and not hurting anyone and bringing people together, and it's good. If it's good, it's good.
Yeah, that's right. I think I mentioned that earlier. Like there does seem to be some principles that you can bet on. It's like, okay, well, that you can't go wrong if you hold that thing to be true. Mm-hmm. If you follow that, there's no harm that's going to come from it. And even if something does, you're at least going to feel good about what you've done, because it's good for you, good for others, good for the greater good, as they say. And I suppose if you follow those things, it's difficult to go totally wrong.
Having a direct relationship with a higher power is your birthright. There's no intermediaries necessary. I can say I like that idea. That's a positive idea in my life. You can have a direct relationship with a higher power, with God or your God. You can have a direct relationship.
With the prayer, there, you were Troy was mentioning a guy that writes these prayers.
Yeah, so that was the teacher I referred to before, a guy called Howard Wills, and his prayers are beautiful, and he's a wild guy. He's like a spiritual father to me that I met a long time ago. I think 2012, not long after I came to Los Angeles, from the perspective that he influenced me very positively with a lot of ideas that have made up a portion of my foundation of my work. And I've seen him do incredible things with his work and positively influence a lot of people through his practice. And he's been one of the many people that, like I said, standing on the shoulders of giants that have helped me in different portions of my own journey, and that I keep bits and pieces of that I share. Because I kind of really didn't understand this before, but I really understand it much better now. Is you can only go as deep with someone that you've gone yourself. It goes back to that idea we're talking about. It's like you write a book for yourself, right? Or even this conversation I'm having you right now, I could be having for myself, reminding myself or exploring something even deeper for myself. And then that really eliminates that any kind of angle of like, I'm right, you're wrong, I know more, you know less, I belong, you don't, whatever it is. It's so silly. It's like, I'm learning as we're going too. And that's really, really good. And you know, there's many ways to do this thing we call life. There's many ways to do it. And if there's a better idea that comes along that slays one of my ideas, I'm not religious about it. I'm really open to it.
Well, my final question, Paul, and I'm a slightly twist on the one I asked you last time. Normally I ask a memorable example of escaping your own limits, but in light of some of the conversations we've had, I'm curious to know, what does escape your limits mean to you?
Escape my limits, what does it mean to me? I think that we impose limits on ourselves, and sometimes someone comes along that has a stronger story that is kind of like vibrating here. You know, when you get one of those anomalies that comes into the room that just ignites everybody, that is got this belief, this strength of conviction in their story, and it's vibrating like that. It's like osmosis, and you're maybe vibrating here, and then you're hanging around with this person, and the next thing you know, you're doing that. That's what I feel like escaping limits is. And that doesn't have to be a person. It might have been a set of circumstances. It might be like something like we talked about, me climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. That might be the vibration that shifts your vibration. It might be a divorce, which sounds crazy, but that could actually change your life to the point where you've recognized where you were going against yourself or not following your own path, and then it sets you free to do that. So it could be a person, a place, or an activity that has got a frequency or a vibration that affects you to the point where it takes you out of your current state and it shifts you into a transcendent state. And that's where possibility exists. And that's a beautiful thing. Infinite possibilities. Yeah, anything's possible.
Well, Paul, thanks. I've got a lot to think about on my way home, that's for sure.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you. Love it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you've got any value from it whatsoever, then please do us a favor, like, subscribe, tell somebody, and that will help us to be able to continue to do more of these and help you escape your own personal limits. Thanks for listening.